Welcome to the Gray Stage podcast, episode number 10. Today we'll be covering chapter 6 in the book by Greg Fernandez Jr., The Gray Stage. My name is Dan Hennon. I'll be joined today with Sophia, Catherine, and of course Greg Fernandez Jr., the author himself. How are you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing well, thank you, my brother. Hope you're doing good.
And how about Sophia, Catherine, and Anne?
We're doing great. At least I am.
Excellent. We've got an interesting topic today here for this book. In this chapter, we're heading off with chapter 6 here for episode 10. We'll be talking about the kitchen laptop. And in this Crowley case, there's a lot of things that tie into this. And there's also, I think, enough questions and things that have come up, since then as well. A lot of people that are newer to the Justice page, some of the newer members, a lot of questions do come up surrounding this chapter. So this will be a good episode. I'll start off here by reading the first paragraph from Greg's book, The Kitchen Island. The laptop, labeled as AV-8, was opened to a black screen on the kitchen island when authorities entered the house. The device was plugged into a power outlet just above the kitchen sink, and the screen was black. Love in quotes, was written on the laptop cover. Anne, did you want to go give a little more of a background on this situation here?
Yes, I would like to give you guys a visual of this area where the laptop was found. There is a kitchen island in the Crowley home. The island basically divides the kitchen and the living room. The front part of the island is made of drywall and it's green. The top part is a granite type surface. That is where the laptop is sitting open. Behind the laptop, towards the back of the island facing the kitchen, you will see a sink, a cabinet, and in the corner is a dishwasher. There were some Christmas items and other things on top of the island. This episode is just going to focus on the laptop. So we just wanted to give you an idea of what you guys will be seeing and hearing about.
Perfect. All right, continuing on the second paragraph. Blood and partial fingerprints, end quote, were visible on the laptop surface and keyboard. Several blood stains were visible on the kitchen island counter next to the laptop. When the laptop was swabbed for DNA purposes, the black screen awoke to reveal a text message reading, quote, "I have loved you all with all of my heart," end quote. What do you think about that, Greg?
Well, I wish we had a better photo of it. I know we have the photo that shows where the text message should be, or where the text message is. For me, it is a little difficult to read. So that was the first thing. I wish we did have a better photograph of that, but that's okay. We'll go with the photograph that we do have. And this was one of the notes that was used to suggest that David Crowley was guilty, because he had written 2 notes in this house. And then the obvious question is, how do they know that David actually wrote this? And is this a suicide note?
Yes, and this is on the laptop. So once again, this is typed, and this was just brought up. In my assumption, this was like a notepad or a word pad or a word processing type of a program that was opened up and someone just keyed it in. We don't have the name of who keyed it in or who actually did the typing, except someone just wrote it, "I have loved you all with all of my heart," and just left it up. And I don't think that when the investigation took place with this hard drive, and this all went to the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit, and I don't know if we got a date created or a timestamp as to when this file was created. And I don't believe the file was saved. I think it was just opened and left there in what commonly we would see in today's world be an untitled or a Microsoft Word or untitled document. But it still should have a created date and a created time. That would be interesting to know when this file was opened and created. We know it was never saved, so we can't really essentially get back to when whoever did it to get back to a time frame once again. But yes, it's done and staged to make it look like David had committed these heinous acts, had blood on his hands, and then opened up the laptop and started typing it. Now, the other thing we need to keep in mind is that the laptop was not shut off. It was kept open, and it was in a blank screen. I would call it either in hibernate mode or in a screensaver mode or in power saving energy mode. But all they did was, when your laptop is off for a period of time, even though it's still plugged in, you can touch the touchpad or the enter key or the space bar or some other key, and it'll wake it back up. It'll wake up that laptop. And I think that's what happened here. They were swapping the keys and activated and woke up that machine again. And that's when this arose. I mean, this thing was typed up there, meant for the first person to see it to know exactly, what happened here. I think is what the intent was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I also thought that it was weird that, maybe not weird, but it was very interesting, let's put it like that the where love is typed up, and I was able to find 3 places, or where love is actually mentioned. Love is on the laptop. It's also on the Amazon, whatever this is, Kindle, Amazon Fire. It's written on the back of that too. And then in the office bedroom, in dust, love is actually written on top of the computer there too. So that's at least 3 electronic devices. Love is not written on the Surface Pro that is found in the living room that belonged to Kamel.
And there's something I would like to add here too that I noticed, like right here. I took this photo, and then when you enlarge it, if you try to, look at the letters that spell out "I have loved you with all of my heart," there is no blood on the majority of those keys. So that means, you have some blood like on the A and a little bit on the O and a little on the D, but look at the W is clean, the I is clean, the U is clean. Those should not be clean if this is supposedly typed by somebody with bloody fingers. Being a typist, even if you're one fingering it, if you're typing with your 2 hands or if you're using one finger, there should be blood on every single one of those keys that spell that out. But the majority of those keys are clean. That, to me, tells me, what my assumption then is that the person who put that message on that laptop had gloves on. And that, to me, rules out David, because why would he put gloves on to type a message just before he supposedly shoots himself? Doesn't make sense.
And Catherine, that's a good point, because you would see by looking at this phrase that he wrote, I think the top 2 most commonly used letters were A and L in this phrase.
Yes.
A and L. And so you would think that there would be multiple blood marks on those 2 keys on the laptop. And what you're saying is that we don't see blood on the letters used here at all in that phrase, but what we do see is what appears to be a haphazard smattering of some blood on the laptop with David's with his fingerprints. It still looks staged because it just was there on random parts of the laptop, the blood, but not in the points that would be the last used keys that the person typed. And that's the point you're getting at, which is the most important point of this, which detectives did not seem to put together that scenario. Correct?
Correct, absolutely correct. And that should have been something that they should have first looked at. When you're looking at something that's typed on a computer screen, you're going to look down below and look at those keys. Because they, I thought for sure they had mentioned the blood on the A key, and that just could be my imagination. But you look at a thing, and then you look down, and you're like, okay, is this matching up with what I'm seeing? And there is no match whatsoever. So right there, I mean, there's so many instances where this should have been a huge light bulb going off to these officers. And again, they either just completely ignored it, didn't think about it, or said, you know what, we have a scenario, we're just going to run with it.
Correct.
Looks like blood on the delete key as well. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't look at that, but I was looking at the I, and then spelling out the IHAVED, you know, YOUWITH. And when you look at all those, I mean, the W is used a lot too, and it's clean. The YOU is clean, or the O might have a little bit. And I'm just like, this keyboard does not match with those so-called, you know, last note written.
That eye should probably be one of the most bloodiest if it's the first one, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because if one hand is bloody, the other hand is going to be bloody. But even if they try to say, well, maybe just the left hand was bloody, well, then why isn't the W and the keys that are used with the left hand, why aren't those bloody? And exactly, the I, especially since that was used first, and the shift key. It would have been Shift I, because were these all capitals, or you would think I think at least the I was capitalized.
Yes, just the I.
Yeah, and so the Shift key looks clean to me.
Very good point, because these would be the letters most used in this phrase, and this was really, from what we can tell on the laptop, the only things that were typed. One can assume that the very last thing as far as the official narrative is David went to his musical playlist called Ascents and clicked play on that. But there was no other typing done on this laptop immediately after the crimes were committed, except for this one situation. Should I go on to the next paragraph? I find that very interesting. I've got some comments on that, Greg.
Sure.
He says, quote, I was not certain if this note was saved or otherwise date or time stamped, end quote. And this is what Detective Brian Bone reported. Now, I'll continue on. The note was not signed and was in the format of a typed note, end quote. Authorities assumed the message was written by David Crowley, but that assumption remains unproven. So back to this beginning part, we're looking at a date or time stamp on a file. Brian Bowen is just the detective here, and maybe this is true that he did not know the date time stamp on this, but once again, the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit, this is all they do. This is what they do. There would be a file open. For instance, if I'm looking at not on a Mac, but on a regular PC, you'd have a document there with a little tilde in front of it as a temporary file name. That would still have a date and timestamp on that file, that temporary file, which goes in that temp folder gets saved in when as you're working on things. And then when you go to actually do a save as, or save it and place it somewhere on your folder, it'll give it the actual name and the date and timestamp. But this would have had a date, time, and created when the file was open and someone began typing. And so Brian Bone, as a detective, may or may not know that, although I'm assuming anyone in today's world would at least ask that question. But the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit would have known that for sure once that temporary file that was used sitting out there would still have a date and timestamp. So I don't get the fact that Brian Bowen says that. And he does go on to say that it was not signed, but it was in the format of a typed note. Okay, that's obvious enough. And the assumption was that it was written by David Crowley. Of course, anyone looking at the scene, the way it was staged, is going to think that David did all these things. But these are all just circumstantial things that don't mean anything yet. So we really don't get any real good meat from the detectives on this. We just get several sentences of various assumptions, which doesn't do any of us any good. What do you think, Sophia or Anne, when you look at that paragraph?
I think there's a possibility also that this so-called note typed on the computer was typed before the murders, and it has nothing to do with the Crowley family being murdered. Because you see, like Greg said, the word love typed several times in the house. There's a bowl on the counter with those rocks with terms of endearment written on the rocks. There's that note on the fridge, which was, a loving note between a husband and wife. This letter on the laptop could have been just written as something special between the both of them that has nothing to do with suicide note or anything that happened after.
And I have to agree with that. I mean, it could have been written at any time. It's just that it's there on the screen. It's very possible that it could have been just part of the staging. It's like, oh, here, it's right here. We'll just use it as a possible suicide note. Just like other things that were around the house that were assumed were suicide notes and stuff.
The other thing I think with all suicide notes, whether they're written or typed, is the signature. You have to have that signature. Something to say, this is what I want, this is my wishes, or this is what's going on in my head. And then you sign your name. So this stuck out to me when I saw this alleged suicide note with no signature once again. And of course, when you get into staged crimes and situations like this, most of the time those are typed up. Those are typed to make it look like someone else is doing it. An actual suicide note, maybe multiple pages long, handwritten or however, to clear the air after the case is done, to let the ones still living know what was going on in there and what they were dealing with. So this doesn't have this. It's got it has that feel of staging once again. But you're right, it could have been something that he wrote back in October or November. It could have been something that he had written back in April. But if we would have had a timestamp that showed January 10th or something to that effect, it would have clearly led us into a much narrower time frame. And that's what we don't have here. That's what we don't get. And that's the thing that's important with this, I think. That would have been the first thing that the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit would have been focused in on, the timestamp, date and timestamp. So they finished up their investigation and gave the laptop back to the father. So it's too late now to go back and even look at something like that, unless Dan Crowley Sr. would know where to look on that path directory to see where that file would be sitting if it was still there to this day. And hopefully things like that were done, but as we can assume with everything else in this case, we can't assume anything. Greg, should I go on to the next paragraph?
Yeah, let's do it.
3 areas of bloody ridge detail were identified on the laptop and labeled as A, B, and C. Of the 3 areas, only area 1 was sufficient for latent print analysis. Item 54 is a CD of 25 NEF images of latent prints found on the laptop. A digital latent palm print of area A was then labeled LP54-1. LP54-1 was searched in the Midwest Automated Fingerprint Identification Network, the MAFIN database, and no suitable candidate was generated. Additionally, no known palm prints for David Timothy Crowley were submitted or found in the BCA files for comparison to LP54-1.
So there is no way that anybody could ever claim that any of the palm prints found, if any other palm prints were found, there's no way they can tie those to David Crowley just by this one fact here. It's more proof David Crowley did not do this, and it's more proof that people assume that David Crowley did, and that is not right. There's something wrong about that. There's no reason to, because if you're really looking for who did this, then you know you don't have any palm prints tied to David. You can never say that these prints are from David. But of course, we have the Gray State Goons who are running around telling people David wrote this. There's no proof that David wrote anything on this laptop, and there's no proof that any of the palm prints found at this scene match David, just by this one fact here.
Now, the question that I have, Greg, and this may be more of a question directed toward Catherine, is what I find in this paragraph is very, the words are crafted very interesting in this paragraph, meaning they couldn't find the search of the Minnesota Automated Fingerprint, the MAFIN database. No suitable candidate was generated, so they tried to do the match and they couldn't find it. Now that database is only filled with criminals, right? People with criminal past that have been fingerprinted, and so they couldn't find a match. And they also tried the palm prints to try to match those to BCA for comparison. Now, once again, if David was not a criminal or didn't have a criminal past, would his fingerprints even be in the databases of any of those two databases? And that may be a question for Catherine.
No, since he wasn't a criminal, his fingerprints would not be in the MAFIN, but they had his fingerprint card from the military. But just because they don't find it in a database doesn't mean squat, and I think we all pretty much know this, that just because someone hasn't been caught or hasn't, they may not have documented this before, or they may not have done this type of crime before. So unless they have been, like you stated, arrested, fingerprinted, and everything, their prints would not be in this database.
I've got a question on that. Just regarding this database, they're looking at fingerprints here, but then they're talking about palm prints. Shouldn't they be looking, can you tell from a fingerprint? Are you going to be able to tell, can you match a palm to a fingerprint?
It's been a really long time since I went through meth, but I remember them doing DNA, that they also did every fingerprint on both hands. They printed both hands very well, but I can't remember if they did a palm print too. So if our audience, if you've gone through the military in the 2000s, could you please let us know if they did your palm print too? Because I seem to remember that they did, but I went in the 90s. So, things could have changed.
And it's good that they're looking at this database, but is there a larger database that maybe in the future they could look into that isn't just for the Midwest?
And we could also go the route of knowing David Crowley's background. He was not a criminal, or not that we know of, that he didn't commit any crime. So I would guess his prints would not be in the MAFIN, his prints and palm prints would not be in the BCA, but we know that being in the military, he would have both his fingerprints this is my opinion, his palm prints would be with the military, so they already have those things. But it says that no known palm prints from the military were submitted to the BCA.
Does the fact that they were looking in this database, does that show that they at least were looking for possible suspects, for somebody other than David, because they could have pulled up his criminal record and found pretty quickly that it wasn't him. Does this show that maybe they were looking quietly for other suspects?
Well, if you look at the work, it says no suitable candidate was generated. So, were they looking for other candidates?
Does the Moffin database have palm prints, or would it just?
Well, when you look at it online, and it states here, and I'm reading from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension website right now, and it states the arrest records of 10 print fingerprint cards, and they may also include palm print cards. So they do have some palm prints on record. But I think the fact that they were looking in this database, I just think that's standard operating procedure. So they just kind of say, oh yeah, we ran it, we didn't find anything. You know, is my take on it. Could be wrong.
And that's good. That shows that they are doing, you know, like we've talked about previously. There are things in here that they are doing that are standard, which is good. That's what they should be doing. And that also shows that they do all of these standard things and still cannot find anything tying this crime scene to David, other than him being there.
Correct. Yeah, I think these were procedures that were followed, and no answers came back, which means that they were doing their job for the most part on a peripheral level. Found no answers, so they moved forward. But I don't think he would have any information in those records. Yeah. Anyway,
I mean, reading this, I would say that they basically proved that David did not write this. That's the way I read it.
I would like to add, okay, let's say you do believe that David wrote it for whatever reason. Okay, so first of all, police have determined no motive of why these deaths occurred, but we've heard various theories on what could have led David to murder his family and himself. And this note, if it is a suicide note, doesn't support any of those theories. This note doesn't show hatred towards Kamel's past or her being a Muslim. This note doesn't show obsession with Gray State or weird conspiracy theories. This note doesn't show PTSD. This note doesn't support anything that David has been alleged of doing. It doesn't support any of the proposed theories of why David would do this. And I think that in itself says this is definitely not a suicide note. And if David didn't write this, then it probably was staged.
There you go.
This just sounds like something that Kamel has written before. Didn't she write something on the back of a photograph and
Yes.
put it to her sister?
Yeah, I will always love you and Mom, something like that. The way this note is written, I'm glad you brought that up because it just reminded me of when it says, I have loved you all with all of my heart. Who is this message for? Whether it was written by David or whether it was written by, by killers, who would this be for? Who is this message targeted to? This is the first thing that comes up when the cops or the BCA swab the laptop. This was meant for them to see first. It's obviously not meant for them. It's not meant to say that David has loved them.
It is very nondescript. Yeah. And I had not thought about that until you mentioned it. It is extremely nondescript and vague.
Similar to the note that's written in the office bedroom. Who is it for? Who is it really for? Is it code word? Is it warnings? What is the real purpose of that writing? That's all I got on A, B, and C here. I'm just going through showing people some of the photos of after they were sprayed with a chemical. And yeah, they're palm prints, some type of palm prints. I'm glad, Catherine, that you were able to find that those would be included in that database, and couldn't find anyone. So it's just like can't connect it to anyone, including David. So there's no conclusion here. There's no, okay, we found this, it ties to David, this is how we know that David wrote this. You don't have that here in this case. If you weren't to look at these documents, if you weren't to look at these photos, you would not know that. You probably would not know that. If you were to just watch the slopumentary, you definitely would not know that. And so that's why it's so important to be able, time willing, to be able to look at this stuff, to be able to look at these documents, to go through them yourself. And so all of us here are trying to make that as easy as possible for people. Not to tell you what you should think, but when you look at this, how would you ever think that David Crowley did this when they clearly can't tie these bloody palm prints, these prints, they can't tie these to anybody. So in reality, we don't know who wrote anything on this laptop.
Yeah, I think too.
Has anything else on that? Go ahead.
And this is Dan. I think too, what we're looking for, what we're seeing here is everything is very vague, everything is very general, everything is left open-ended, and I think that's the other goal, if you will, for a staged scene. So you can't go too far down any certain rabbit holes. It's just left open to keep people guessing. That's their goal here, is to keep everyone guessing and wondering, and not provide answers. Is my opinion on these types of things. They don't want to go too far. They want to keep it open-ended.
All right. There's nothing else.
I continue on with the next.
Yeah.
I can continue on. At the bottom of page 51, it says, item 23 is blood swabbed on the surface of the laptop. DNA results tie the blood to Kamel, while excluding David and Rania. And so here we get once again, not the obvious, but it makes sense. That the blood used, whether it was writing on the wall or the blood found at the scene, seems to be Kamel's, which means either she was killed first, or her blood was the most accessible for these types of things. But it doesn't give us the answer of who did the writing, who did it, who left the prints. We know that it's Kamel's blood. Anything else on that, or should I continue with page 52?
I'd say go ahead.
Okay, according to Joe Cooksley, quote, the item 23 bloodstain was in close proximity to apparent bloody ridge detail. A chemical was used to enhance the ridge detail. The ridge detail was documented with photographs prior to and after the application of the enhancement chemical, unquote. This may be, once again, something Catherine could help us with this for those of us not in this field.
What's
a bloody ridge exactly?
The ridge detail, you see those little lines. Oh, here we go. I'm using my mouse, and you guys can't see my mouse. I'm sorry, but yes, those lines right there is that's the ridge detail, and that is what will make up and let them know if it's a palm print, the side of your hand, the fingerprint, or whatever. But those little designs there is what is known as the ridge detail.
Do these look like they should be able to get something, tie it to somebody at some point, or is there enough here or no?
You know, that I don't know how much they need, and just to me, well, oh wait, there's some pretty good stuff there at the bottom. It depends on where this is, you know, is this like the side of the hand? I don't know. It doesn't look like fingerprints per se, but it, you know, it could be the side of somebody's hand or somebody's palm, but
this would be a right hand. This would have to be a right hand. It's on the right side of the keyboard, I would, or the surface of the keyboard of the laptop. So that's where this is found.
Yeah, and it looks like a certain amount of pressure was applied, whatever they used, if it was the side of their hand or the front of their hand, because you see where some of the blood pools in certain areas, and then others you see the detail pretty well. Mm-hmm. So it kind of pools and spread out a little, yeah, in that area. But, yeah, I mean, there are other spots on there, not necessarily number 23, but I thought for sure that if I remember correctly, there was another place on there. I don't know if it was, which one is it? I'm looking at your book now. I finally found my book, where the detail looked pretty good, and I couldn't understand why they couldn't get, you know, more fingerprints. There is plenty throughout the house, and not just on the laptop, but other areas where the ridge detail should have been more than sufficient for them to tell you who it was.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything on this image here, or item 23?
I can continue on. Blood found on the A, capital A key of the laptop was swabbed and labeled as item 24. Though collected and itemized, the blood on the A key was not submitted for DNA testing. I'll leave that there. How common is that, or uncommon, to collect it but then not submit it?
Well, they'll collect a whole bunch of samples throughout a crime scene, and then they will choose. It kind of looks like pick and choose, but and sometimes it will look randomized, but there's always a method to the madness. However, in most of the cases that I've been doing reading and research on, if there appears to be separate blood within the same area and they're not sure whose it is, they will test both samples. But if the blood is all within the same area and looks to have come from the same source, then they'll just swab one and then just test that. And here on this laptop, there's no proof that this is coming from the same source. So they should have swabbed that. I mean, tested it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, looking at this image that I have up here, are there any? Is there any evidence that we see in any of these photos to tell what type of blood? Is this a hand that was just bloody? Is this a hand that might have been bloody for hours, for longer? The reason I ask is on the command key, on the kind of on the lower left side here, where the command key almost looks like there's a drop there. It doesn't really look like somebody touched the command key. Looks kind of small, but it looks like maybe a blood dropping. So I was just curious about that. If there's any way to tell from the blood that we see on this laptop, is there any way to tell how old the blood on the hands might be?
Yes, you can tell if blood is sitting on someone's hands for a while before they touch. It will either flake off, or as the blood starts to coagulate, because obviously there would have been a lot of blood on their hand, it would have left a different type of impression. The types, and you're right, that does almost look like a blood droplet that was disturbed at one point, but I would have to enhance and enlarge that photo to tell for sure. But like with the A and the rest of it, that was all fresh blood.
On this F key, the F key looks kind of odd too, and I don't think there's any.
And for that one, it just could be the way the shadowing is and how they took that photo. It's really hard to tell, because what you're looking at, that little dark spot underneath the F, when you look at the J key, those little lines are for typists who, when you're not looking, you know your fingers are right on the home key settings. So you know that index finger, once it feels that little nudge, it knows it's on the letter F. So that just could be that. But is there extra blood? It could be. It looks like there could be some little drops next to that, but again, the photo is really hard to read.
And that's all I had for 24.
Should I continue on with 25, Grid? Sure. All right, item 25 is blood swabbed on the kitchen island countertop next to the laptop. This item was not tested. Neither was the blood stain on the tissue box. Item 26.
25 of all of the things here. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, that was it. So 25 is next to the laptop. Was not tested. And then there was a small square-sized tissue box. Item 26.
Yeah.
Also wasn't tested.
I think of all of the blood in the house, 25 looks the most, I can't think of a better word, but strained, or like, it's just, it doesn't look like prints, it's almost just like lines. I don't know, I don't even know. I mean, everyone who can see this for the podcast, people listening to the podcast, you need to go and see these photos, but when you look at item 25, what am I seeing here? This is, of all of the images here, this blood, it just looks, I can't even describe it but any other way than just strained or lines. It's thin lines, I guess. I don't know.
This is what they call, to me, that looks like transfer. And there's part of these types of lines as well on the touchpad. But yes, this looks like something was bloody and then touched that surface. So it transferred the blood from whatever it was on onto that surface. Would be my guess.
I have to agree with that. Like a sleeve or something.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But they just placed down maybe a sleeve or a rag or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that would make sense.
I think it's interesting also. It looks like there was like a strand of hair by those bloody lines. And it looks like there is like a bulb or something at the end of the hair. I mean, could they collect DNA off of that?
Yes, you can get DNA from the end of a piece of hair.
And where did you see that hair? On the laptop here? Next
Okay,
to
so if you look at the laptop, it looks like there's a streak of hair. See, they have that, I think it was gold, it was the last picture you showed, number 25. See how there's this streak, and above it, it looks like a line or something? Yeah, is that a hair?
It might be here. There are a few hairs on here. I've seen on the other side. I don't know if those are scratches or hairs, but there's some type of line. I mean, even this MiFi thing, this Wi-Fi thing that David has here in the upper, it looks like that has, there's something wet on that, almost like there's, I don't know if there's blood on that. Blood isn't mentioned here. A little bit below it looks like the USB port that you would put in for a mouse for a wireless mouse, and he just didn't have, there weren't enough ports for everything, so one was taken out. So I don't think that this MacBook Pro, I don't think that this is where this MacBook Pro was used. It was purposely set here, and it was probably, might have been the first time this MacBook Pro was ever here on this kitchen island. All meant to look staged, all meant to look like just ready, just to have everything ready when the investigators come in, including not having it password protected. Same thing with the computer in his office bedroom. It's not protected by a password. That also is another sign that anybody could have gotten into these computers at any time and written anything that they wanted to, and taken off anything that they wanted to at any time. This is almost like that open rear slider here. They're looking for things that they don't need to be looking for. They're looking for people forcing their way into this house when they have an open door. They're looking for reasons to think that David Crowley wrote this when it's clear anybody who had access to this house, and via the open door, anybody in the whole world could have gotten into this house. In theory, they probably would have had to have known that dog in order to do that, but anybody could have gotten onto this laptop and typed, "I have loved you all with all of my heart," easily. So it's just more that just shows that it's not David. What's weird is Kamel's Surface Pro is protected by a password. It's the only one that, of all of these three computers in this house, it's the only one that is protected. I wonder if somebody was trying to get something inside of that laptop. Maybe there was something there that somebody wanted taken off.
So that was the only electronics that had a password on it?
Of these three, yeah.
How interesting.
Even the song choice, there was a lot of stuff made about the songs that were on this laptop. I'm going to go back to those too. It's playing randomly, and the fact that in this image, in one of the crime scene images, Curtis Mayfield, is that what it is?
I sure hope that people don't look at my phone list after I die.
Well, the whole thing is they were making a big deal about this song, and it's like, that is just the song that was playing while these photos were being taken. But there's several songs that were being played while the photos were being taken. But for some reason, this photo is the one, or this song is the one that ends up being the last song in Eric Nelson's film. Let me get to that. Yeah, right here. Fall Behind, Moses Mayfield. Fall Behind the Inside. So, there was a big deal made about that, but in these other photos here, there's a different song playing. You just can't see it that well. It's pretty interesting that the one that we can see super duper well is the one that just happens to be the song that's played at the end of the sloppymentary. Some of the other songs, there's the Spider-Man 3 song, 2 Spider-Man 3 songs, maybe even more. It looks like 14 songs in total for the Spider-Man 3 soundtrack. And there's at least 2 of Kamel's quote-unquote friends in the police reports that said that Kamel said that they were going to move to California. David was going to work on the new Spider-Man movie, which probably would have been, I don't know if that would have been Spider-Man 3, if that would have been the ones that were made after this, but Probably the ones after that, with Garfield. I forget his first name, but Andrew Garfield, I think was his name. But so this song list and all of these songs have been another interesting thing. The fact that this is a 53 songs, a 4-hour playlist. Be nice to know when the playlist was actually made too, and why this was playing here too. It just seems everything that's on this laptop, and they take shots. We have, I think, 3 screenshots that I just have here, and it's all different stuff in the background. Lots of different playlists, lots of different things going on here. We've got the podcast, Ranya's favorite, so Ranya had access to this too. This is playing through a Bluetooth speaker that died. Bluetooth, speakers don't last that long, so maybe the bodies were not meant to be discovered 3 weeks later, or 2 weeks later, or even 1 week later. Maybe they were meant to be found soon after these killings happened. That's all speculation, but just with that laptop, some interesting stuff. Go ahead.
I just find it curious that the Bluetooth speaker is so far away from being plugged in. I mean, where we look at the kitchen, that plug, I'm assuming the where the plug cover is broken near the sink, and we see that big power plaque. I'm assuming that's where the Bluetooth speaker was being charged or whatever. But would it matter where it was placed? Could it have just sat up there on the island and they could have heard everything just the same as if it was near the living room? Or it's like, why did they need to move it and have it unplugged?
I don't see any reason for that. None here, definitely. I think I have an image of where that speaker. So here's the speaker. Hard to tell, but yeah, it's not. I mean, obviously it had. I don't know. It would have to be somewhat close. I think the speaker could definitely work there. It's just weird that it was there. I pull up an image to kind of show where the laptop was, and then the speaker is somewhere around this area, but it's pretty interesting. Oh, this might be one where you can have, this one actually shows both of them. Looking at it from, if you're entering the front door here, you got the laptop over here. This blue mug is actually, it does say cop on it, so it's some type of law enforcement. The laptop does have a sticker over it too, and I don't know if all of them in the house do. I think they all might too, but you can see the distance from the laptop to where that Bluetooth speaker is.
Yeah, it's really not that far, so I don't think it would really.
And I mean, in this image, you can also see where those bloody prints are here, and that's where you would expect the laptop to be. That's where I would expect it, but it's not. So when the writing was, whatever was typed into this laptop, whatever was done with this laptop, nobody had bloody feet. There's no bloody feet there. Same thing with when words are being typed onto the laptop. Some keys have blood and other keys don't. And they all should. I mean, really, they all should. So there's some serious problems here. And these, again, this is just looking at the laptop, just looking at what proves that David Crowley wrote anything on this laptop, and we're just not seeing it. Now I remember I got a few notes here. The typed message and the written note in the office bedroom were both used to trick people into thinking these were suicide notes. That was a big thing. That was hinted in the early police reports. That was hinted, not the early police reports, in the early narrative, in the early media reports. Even when I talked to Kamel's sister, and she also said that those were suicide notes. And it shows how easily somebody can be tricked into thinking that they are when they're not. Neither of those two notes that are written are suicide notes. Not proven suicide notes. I guess if you want to believe they're suicide notes, you can, but why? Why would you think that? Without any proof of who wrote it, of who did it, why? I thought we were trying to find the truth here, not to play our guessing game. Let's see. To be clear, it cannot be proven who wrote the typed sentence on the laptop. So why was this assumed within 24 hours of finding these bodies? And when authorities realized they could not prove David wrote that sentence, what did they do? After they realized, months later, after they realized that it could not be proven that David Crowley wrote anything on the laptop, how did they respond? They just ruled the case exceptionally clear. That doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem fair.
No.
The fact that the laptop was found in sleep mode shows that anyone could have written these sentences. The laptop was not password protected, similar to the computer in the office bedroom, yet Kamel's Surface Pro found in the living room was password protected. So that's another thing that stood out to me. We talked about the A, we talked about all that. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover. Item 24, where that A key is, have all heart. I mean, that A, there should be a lot of blood on that A key, but not just the A key. There should be a lot of blood on the H key. There should be a lot of blood on a lot of the other keys too. So it is very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, where the blood is on those keys and where it isn't, and why some things were never tested. I mean, you think the A would at least be tested. They test the surface of the laptop. Why not test one key at least? So that's all I got, good peeps.
Yep, same here. I'm down another rabbit hole just doing this already. I'm writing copious notes, and I will send it to you guys soon.
Yeah, I agree with Catherine. There's lots of rabbit holes. And interesting.
I think the only thing. This is Dan. The only two things that I would think of that I would have liked to have seen on the police report was if the laptop, the MacBook Pro, was password protected at one point, when was the password taken off, or when was the password removed? That should be somewhere in the registry of that computer, the date and timestamp of when that was taken off as well, unless perhaps maybe David always had that off, but we don't know. The other thing would be, I know we talked about the Bluetooth and the speaker, and of course, the battery died, but what was the volume setting at on his MacBook Pro? Was it 99? Was it 13? Was it 50? Was it, what was the volume setting? Was it meant to alert and wake up the neighbors, or was it set to a very soft?
Full blast. It's on full blast here. It's at the.
It is. Okay. Okay.
Now that's on the laptop. Maybe the Bluetooth, the Bluetooth could have its own settings too. So
gotcha.
I don't know.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. That's all that I had for today.
All right.
Yep, I'm done too.
The only thing I would add is not only are we not seeing blood on the keys mentioned, we're just not seeing blood, period. If David really did kill his family and himself and then dipped his hands in blood or whatever and wrote on the walls, there should be blood all over the keyboard, stuck in between the keys, on the counter. There should be, pattern of drips from the wall on the floor to the island. We're just not seeing blood, period.
Yeah, I would expect the laptop to be more covered in blood, like the island countertop also. But what we're seeing is just transfer marks. So it just doesn't make sense.
Since there's no blood on the back of the laptop, I guess this would have had to have been open.
Mm-hmm.
Which again could be another sign of a scene interrupted, I suppose. Alright, well, if there's nothing else, then I guess we'll go ahead and shut this one down. I want to thank you all again for joining us here for episode number 10, The Kitchen Laptop. Episode number 11 will be released December 1st, and of course we'll continue on with chapter 6. In the kitchen, we'll be starting at page 52 in the physical book. And there is a lot of interesting stuff to go there. We're going to talk about the newspaper found in the kitchen. So that will be a good one to wrap your head around, because there's a few things there to me that do not make sense. But we'll go through everything in the kitchen, and we will continue to see that there is nothing that proves David Crowley guilty. So there's your spoiler for next month. God bless you all. And I'll go ahead and shut this down. Dan, any final words here? You took us in. Why don't you take us out?
No, I don't think there's nothing else. It's certainly an interesting chapter, as is your entire book. And I like the reason I like the book, Greg, is that it's fact-based, it's evidence-based. There's no opinions in there. It's just laying out the facts, and it really exposes the things that were either not done correctly or not done at all. Or somewhere in between. It's done in a very good way.
Thank you for that, brother. And I will shut this one down right now.